What's up, guys? I'm DK, and you're watching Pro Wrestling What If, the series where I look at the different what if scenarios as terms of the world that we call professional wrestling. The first WrestleMania took place on March 31st, 1985, at the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden in New York City, with the event having been so successful that we've experienced the event for over 40 years in many different forms. WrestleMania happening in 3 venues on the same day with WrestleMania 2, a huge one-night tournament with WrestleMania 4, but let's talk about WrestleMania 35 for a second. Not because of it having the first ever women's main event, but because WrestleMania was an event that we can all agree was too long. From the pre-show to the end of the main event, it went from 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 1 a.m. the next day, a total of 8 hours of wrestling. And I feel bad for those in Europe who had called into work and being like, "Hey, Billy Bob Jim, I ain't coming to work today because I'm feeling sick." While they're actually not sick, they just need some freaking sleep because it'll be like 7 a.m. by the time they finish watching the event. But then it was the following year at WrestleMania 36 where they had decided that WrestleMania would become a 2-night event, which honestly is so much better because you can squeeze in not only a few more matches, but actually add more length into the matches, and this gives the opportunity for certain matches that deserve to have been the main event to actually be a main event of either night 1 or night 2. But it also made me think, what would the main events be of each night had WrestleMania always been a 2-night spectacle? So that's going to be the topic of today's video. We're discussing what if WrestleMania was always 2 nights. And of course, for this video, I will be going through every WrestleMania from the first all the way until the last single night WrestleMania, being WrestleMania 35, and determining the main events. And if you end up enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button, share this to all your friends, subscribe, and press the notification bell for when future episodes get released, and leave a comment down below about today's topic or suggesting a future topic for an episode of Pro Wrestling What If. Now, mind you, it's pretty self-explanatory that for the most part, Night 2's main event would have been the actual main event of the single night WrestleManias, but that's not the case for every WrestleMania I'm discussing about, so it will be the Night 1 main events that I talk about for the most part unless otherwise specified. So for WrestleMania 1, the Night 1 main event would have been the Andre the Giant versus Big John Studd career versus $15,000 body slam challenge. Now, of course, one word that I can describe WrestleMania is spectacle. And with the World Wrestling Federation, as I should say at the time, being the land of the giants, this would scream out that it would be a main event. Especially with the stipulation like having a career on the line while also getting a ton of cash if you do win this match, would make this an easy contender for it to be the main event of the show, while then people will look forward to the next night while seeing Hulk Hogan team up with celebrity Mr. T against Roddy Piper and Paul Orndorff the next night. WrestleMania 2, the night 1 main event would have been Mr. T versus Roddy Piper in the boxing match. Now, technically, this event had 3 main events because, like I stated earlier, this event took place in 3 venues across New York, Illinois, and California, with the Mr. T and Roddy Piper match actually being the main event if you were in attendance for the New York show, while the British Bulldogs tag team match, I believe, was the Illinois main event, while if you were in Los Angeles, California, the main event was Hulk Hogan and King Kong Bundy in the steel cage match. So with celebrity involvement being a huge thing when it came to WrestleMania at this time, it was a no-brainer for me to think Roddy Piper and Mr. T would have been the main event of a Night 1 WrestleMania 2. WrestleMania 3, the Night 1 main event would have been Ricky the Dragon Steamboat versus Macho Man Randy Savage for the Intercontinental Championship. This match is one of the very few golden era matches that actually aged very well to today's wrestling. Although the reason that there was 93,000 plus fans in attendance was to witness the irresistible force against the immovable object with Hogan and Andre. But when you actually look at it in an in-ring perspective, this easily was the match of the night between Steamboat and Savage, and not only was it the best match of WrestleMania 3, but could be considered as one of the best matches of all time for WrestleMania, which also makes this a no-brainer no-brainer for the main event of night 1 of WrestleMania 3. WrestleMania 4, the night 1 main event would have been Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant in the tournament quarterfinals. Now, pretty much the entire night of WrestleMania 4 was a one-night tournament to determine the World Wrestling Federation champion. After having the rematch of Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant happen a month beforehand and having Andre win the title, Andre would then try to sell the World Wrestling Federation Championship to Ted DiBiase, and thus having the title vacated and setting up the tournament for WrestleMania 4, which at least in my mind, they should have just had that specific match at WrestleMania 4 and perhaps have Hogan win again or Andre win the title to set up a third match for the 5th WrestleMania. But when you actually look at the card of WrestleMania 4, the Hogan and Andre match was actually the first quarterfinal match that happened, while the eventual Final 2's quarterfinal matches happened right after. But to kind of capitalize on the prior year of Andre versus Hogan being the main event, this specific match, which ended in, I believe, a double disqualification or a countout, would have been the main event of night 1 of WrestleMania 4, which then has people wondering and wanting to tune in to night 2 and seeing what the actual Final 2 would be for WrestleMania 4. WrestleMania 5, the night 1 main event would have been Rick Rude versus Ultimate Warrior for the Intercontinental Championship. Now, I almost decided to not put this as the night 1 main event, considering that it was Rick Rude that had walked out as the new Intercontinental Champion, and it was during this period where they usually had the baby faces go over at the end of the night to send the crowd home happy, as we actually never got to see a heel walk out of WrestleMania as a champion until WrestleMania 2000 when Triple H retained the title. But after rewatching this match, there was a little bit of a crowd getting sent home happy while Ultimate Warrior beat the crap out of Bobby Heenan to end off the night while Rick Rude ran away with the title. So I guess there was that to send home the crowd happy for night 1, to still look forward to the Mega Powers imploding for night 2. WrestleMania 6, the night 1 main event would have been the Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire versus Macho King Randy Savage and Queen Sherry mixed tag team match. Now, a lot of these golden era WrestleManias have really been defined by 2 matches, and this seems to be a reoccurring trend, so it made perfect sense for this mixed tag team match to be the main event, especially with Dusty Rhodes and Sapphire being the ones that walked out victorious. WrestleMania 7, the night 1 main event would have been Ultimate Warrior and Randy Savage in the retirement match. Now, a lot of us can agree that Ultimate Warrior isn't exactly the greatest worker, but we could probably say that this was one of Ultimate Warrior's better matches. And especially with not only Ultimate Warrior going over on a heel Randy Savage, but the ending with the reuniting Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth makes it a great enough match and moment itself to main event WrestleMania 7 for its first night. WrestleMania 8, the night 1 main event would have been Randy Savage versus Ric Flair for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. Now, as much as I would have rather had Hulk Hogan versus Sid Justice as the night 1 main event, it is the fact that because we are in the golden era, it is pretty much almost certain that Hulk Hogan would always main event a WrestleMania, thus in this case, main eventing a night 2 of WrestleMania, so the world title does get pushed to night 1, while Hogan's match would be night 2. And once again, still sending the crowd home happy because Randy Savage did walk out as the brand new world champion. WrestleMania 9, the night 1 main event would have been the Mega Maniacs versus Money Inc. for the World Wrestling Federation Tag Team Championships. Now, it is a bit unusual to have the tag team title match as a main event of WrestleMania, but one big reason, of course, is because Hulk Hogan himself is involved in this main event. And yeah, it didn't really end the greatest, where it did end in a disqualification in favor of Money Inc. It wouldn't really matter for night 1, considering that we all know what happened in the actual main event, where Hulk Hogan somehow is the one who would walk out as the brand new World Wrestling Federation champion. WrestleMania 10, the night 1 main event would have been Lex Luger versus Yokozuna for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. Now, even though this match did have a screwy finish because of Mr. Perfect turning heel as the referee and costing Lex Luger the match, it is because of the fact that there were 2 world title matches due to there being 2 Royal Rumble winners that makes it logical that one would be the main event of night 1, while the other would be night 2, leaving us wonder whether night 2 will be Bret Hart versus Lex Luger or Bret Hart versus Yokozuna, which of course would end up being Bret Hart versus Yokozuna for night 2 in this case, and having Bret Hart leave WrestleMania 10 night 2 as the World Wrestling Federation champion. WrestleMania 11, the night 1 main event, would have been Lawrence Taylor versus Bam Bam Bigelow. This is actually the first match of this video where I make the actual main event as night 1 of a WrestleMania. I get it with the celebrity appeal like they've done in the past to have Lawrence Taylor and Bam Bam Bigelow as the main event, but I think we can all easily agree that it was for the best that Diesel versus Shawn Michaels should have been the main event and probably would have been given the night 2 main event. There still was celebrity involvement, especially with Diesel walking out with Pamela Anderson during their match. WrestleMania 12, the night 1 main event, Undertaker versus Diesel. Now this doesn't have to do with anything involving the streak, considering that the streak wasn't actually acknowledged until the early 2000s. So I think this is just a case because both The Undertaker and Diesel were two of the World Wrestling Federation's top stars at the time that they would automatically get the main event, while of course night 2 would have the famous 60-minute Iron Man match between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. WrestleMania 13, the night 1 main event, would have been Undertaker versus Psycho Sid for the World Wrestling Federation Championship. Another match that I mentioned that was the main event of this specific event. However, I think that Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Bret Hart would have been the main event of night 2 due to the fact that that match changed the landscape of not only the company with its storylines, but it changed pretty much the entire professional wrestling business. Yes, it was cool to see The Undertaker win the World Wrestling Federation Championship from Psycho Sid, but with the double turn that had happened with Bret Hart and Stone Cold Steve Austin, this would change the trajectory of how the company would be. WrestleMania 14, the night 1 main event, would have been Undertaker versus Kane. And this, of course, is mainly because of storyline aspect and how this match was drawn out for many months. Having Kane debut during the first Hell in a Cell match at Bad Blood in Your House, and literally keeping Undertaker and Kane apart as terms to any matches until WrestleMania 14. So it makes logical sense, especially being one of the longest matches of the card besides the actual main event of Austin versus Shawn Michaels, to have Kane versus Undertaker as the night 1 main event. WrestleMania 15, the night 1 main event, would have been Butterbean versus Bart Gunn in the Brawl for All. Now I had heavily debated on various different matches, whether it be perhaps Kane versus Triple H, or maybe the Hell in a Cell match with Undertaker and Big Boss Man, where Big Boss Man got hung at the end of the match. Which Big Boss Man being hung would be a horrible way to end off WrestleMania, while although Butterbean and Bart Gunn was a 35-second match and would mark the shortest main event in WrestleMania history, that it was definitely better off to end WrestleMania with that short of a match instead of what could cause a lot of controversy with Undertaker and Big Boss Man inside of Hell in a Cell. WrestleMania 2000, the night 1 main event, would have been the Two Falls triple threat match for the European and Intercontinental Championships with Chris Benoit, Chris Jericho, and Kurt Angle. Now a lot of you would probably want to see the Triangle Ladder match be the main event of the show. None of us really expected that match to be as great as it was. While it makes sense for this triple threat match to be the main event of night 1, considering it has one of the top prizes of the World Wrestling Federation with the Intercontinental Championship being involved in that match, and especially the in-ring quality between all three competitors would have made this an excellent match and was still one of the highlights of this event in the real timeline alongside that Triangle Ladder match. WrestleMania 17, the night 1 main event, would have been Undertaker versus Triple H. Once again, I know I'm kind of robbing the TLC 2 match of this spot of being a main event, but at the end of the day, WrestleMania for the most part should be main evented by a match that draws the most money. And of course, with night 2 in this case having Austin versus Rock Part 2 as the main event, the next biggest stars at the time below Austin and Rock were indeed both both Undertaker and Triple H. So it only made sense, especially with Triple H having main evented WrestleMania the year prior, for him to also main event WrestleMania 17 in this case. WrestleMania 18, the night one main event would have been Triple H versus Chris Jericho for the undisputed World Wrestling Federation Championship. A match that surprisingly main evented the actual show, considering the one match that people remember the most about this event was the Icon versus Icon match between Hollywood Hulk Hogan and The Rock. And I think if Chris Jericho didn't have Triple H involved in that match, then there's no way that Chris Jericho's match would have been the main event of the show, which would make sense in my mind that because there's more money to be made with Icon versus Icon, that the world title in this case would have been night one, while Rock versus Hogan would indeed be the actual main event and be night two's main event. WrestleMania 19, the night one main event would have been Brock Lesnar versus Kurt Angle for the WWE Championship. And no, this isn't because of world titles main eventing each night of WrestleMania. I think that one of the main events of WrestleMania 19 would have been Rock versus Austin Part 3. And I do think potentially that they would have had this match as the night one main event originally. However, because Stone Cold Steve Austin was actually hospitalized the night before WrestleMania 19, which would be night one in this case, that the WWE would have had to pivot by having this WWE Championship match with Lesnar and Angle be the main event of night one, hoping that Austin would be good to go for the next day, which of course we did end up getting the match, thus making Rock versus Austin as the main event of night two of WrestleMania 19. Which also makes sense considering this was, at least until WrestleMania 38, Stone Cold Steve Austin's final professional wrestling match. WrestleMania 20, the night one main event would have been Kurt Angle versus Eddie Guerrero for the WWE Championship. And yes, this will be kind of an ongoing trend for the next few WrestleManias, where one world title main events of WrestleMania and the other one main events night two. Especially it works out perfectly where Eddie Guerrero can win night one and still have the celebration at the end of night two with Chris Benoit as he wins the World Heavyweight Championship. WrestleMania 21, the night one main event would have been John Cena versus JBL for the WWE Championship. Yes, once again, one world title main events night one, and then the other main eventing night two, especially because the Royal Rumble winner Batista had chose the World Heavyweight title, and that's what makes it night two for the most part. WrestleMania 22, the night one main event would have been the triple threat match with Rey Mysterio, Randy Orton, and Kurt Angle for the World Heavyweight Championship. But I think in this case that Vince McMahon wouldn't have wanted the Rey Mysterio match as its night two match, considering that he originally didn't want Rey Mysterio to win the Royal Rumble, but instead have Triple H win the Royal Rumble. But of course, with the real life events that had taken place with Eddie Guerrero's death, it definitely made sense for Rey Mysterio to win, and it was only decided a few weeks before the event that Rey was going to win. Which is why we saw in the real timeline that although Rey Mysterio got the title match at WrestleMania, his match wasn't the main event of WrestleMania, but rather John Cena and Triple H was the main event of the actual event, which would make that match as night two's main event, while Rey Mysterio's match would be night one. WrestleMania 23, the night one main event would have been Undertaker versus Batista for the World Heavyweight Championship. Not only does this continue what I keep mentioning about world title matches on each night, but this match with Undertaker and Batista did mark the huge stretch of amazing streak matches that the Undertaker would have at WrestleMania, so it would have been dumb to not have this match as either night's WrestleMania main event. WrestleMania 24, the night one main event would have been Undertaker versus Edge for the World Heavyweight Championship. Now, this match was the main event of the single night WrestleMania 24, but the reason that I do think it would have been bumped to night one is considering that I think the night two main event would have been the triple threat match with Triple H, Randy Orton, and John Cena. And with John Cena being the face of the WWE at this point, we would basically give John Cena the Hulk Hogan treatment, where very likely he would be the main event of night two as much as possible. I did consider Ric Flair versus Shawn Michaels as the main event of night one, but I think the reason they never made that match as the main event is that it would have given away the fact that it was going to be Ric Flair's final match. WrestleMania 25, the night one main event would have been John Cena, Big Show, and Edge for the World Heavyweight Championship. I'm sure every single one of you are screaming screaming at your computer screen or phone or tablet right now, considering that you're wondering why I didn't choose Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels as the main event of at least night one. And that's because realistically, even though we did expect this match to be absolutely awesome, I just don't think that any of us really expected this to be essentially the greatest WrestleMania match of all time. And I think that would have been the case of management also by having this at least the semi-main event of one of the nights of WrestleMania, while of course we still have the atrocious main event of Triple H and Randy Orton main eventing night two, and then have us still looking back at this event today and saying, why didn't Undertaker and Shawn Michaels main event either nights of WrestleMania 25, which is essentially why we would end up seeing the rematch between Undertaker and Shawn Michaels actually main event WrestleMania 26 the following year. Which, speaking of WrestleMania 26, the night one main event would be John Cena versus Batista for the WWE Championship. This would have to be the night one main event because of what I mentioned about Shawn Michaels and Undertaker needing to be the main event of WrestleMania, especially for night two, because if they would have put what ended up being Shawn Michaels' retirement match as the night one main event, no one would give a about WrestleMania 26 night 2, because the biggest thing going for this event was the streak versus career match. WrestleMania 27, the night 1 main event, would have been Undertaker versus Triple H. In a WrestleMania that was absolutely one of the worst of all time, there was at least one good match and one great match. That one good match of the event was CM Punk versus Randy Orton, but the great match and absolutely the best match of the card was Undertaker versus Triple H, especially topping it off with that amazing storytelling at the end. And yes, unfortunately, Miz and John Cena would still be the main event for night 2, so that they still plant the seeds for what would be Rock versus Cena once in a lifetime the following year. WrestleMania 28, the night 1 main event would have been Undertaker versus Triple H inside of Hell in a Cell with Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee. Yes, somehow even I have screwed CM Punk over of yet again main eventing a WrestleMania. But the fact of the matter is that even though we like to enjoy the title matches, whether it was won by the Royal Rumble winner or not, I mean, not specifically for this WrestleMania because it was 18 seconds long, but I think the biggest draw of WrestleMania at this point, can someone end the Undertaker streak? And that became pretty much a bigger attraction at WrestleMania at this point, rather than watching a title match. And so with this being basically a 4-year storyline between Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and The Undertaker, this 100% would have made sense to main event night 1. WrestleMania 29, the night 1 main event would have been CM Punk versus Undertaker. I don't really think anyone's going to argue with me on that, considering that this was the best match of the night, and like I had mentioned, the biggest attraction besides possibly title matches is seeing if someone can end the Undertaker streak, and this would be the last great Undertaker WrestleMania streak matchup before the streak ends by the hands of Brock Lesnar the following year at WrestleMania 30. Shoutout goes to Jackson Weingart, Jada Sanchez, Fox Starkiller, Lola Pines, Hayden Saravo, and Mr. Randomizer. And the reason that they ended up getting a shoutout is because they joined our YouTube channel membership, which only cost $1.99 a month. Not only do you get the shoutout, but you do get lots of other perks, including early access to every single video and shorts that we produce on this channel. So definitely consider joining our YouTube channel membership. It will be greatly appreciated and will go a long way of helping out this channel a lot. So definitely consider it, but let's get right back to the video. WrestleMania 30, the night 1 main event would have been Daniel Bryan versus Triple H. Now this match had actually been the opening match of WrestleMania 30, but I think in the sense that you're trying to build up who between Triple H and Daniel Bryan was going to be inserted into the world title match in what would be the following night's main event, that it would make sense that this match ends off night 1, and we would celebrate night 1 by seeing Daniel Bryan actually go on to night 2 and challenge Batista and Randy Orton. WrestleMania 31, the night 1 main event would have been Undertaker versus Bray Wyatt. Now, although we are past the great Undertaker WrestleMania matches at this point, I think that this definitely would have made sense with the storyline that was built up for this match. And especially the one great thing I would have liked about a WrestleMania night 1 and night 2 was if we would have had both Bray Wyatt and Undertaker's entrances happen during nighttime, instead of the fact that because this event took place on the West Coast, that when they made their entrances it was daytime while it was just becoming nighttime by the time their matches were over. WrestleMania 32, the night 1 main event would have been Shane McMahon versus Undertaker inside Hell in a Cell. Not only because this was, I believe, the longest match of the entire card of WrestleMania 32, but the fact that when Undertaker was originally supposed to have a different opponent for this event, he was going to main event this specific WrestleMania, since it did take place in his home state of Texas and was originally going to be his retirement match. So at least with a stipulation like Hell in a Cell, it makes sense for it to be the main event of at least night 1, while we still have to put up with Roman Reigns and Triple H for night 2. WrestleMania 33, the night 1 main event would have been Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt for the WWE Championship. Now, I did heavily debate on having the mixed tag team match be the main event, considering of the proposal after the match. However, I think it had to be one of the world title matches, and because of how short Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg was, that this would mean that it would have to be Randy Orton versus Bray Wyatt. Even though we saw all those worms and projection in the middle of the ring, at least with having the Royal Rumble winner main event a night of WrestleMania would make sense in my mind. WrestleMania 34, the night 1 main event would have been Shinsuke Nakamura versus AJ Styles for the WWE Championship. Now, once again, I really heavily debated on what could have been the night 1 main event, and I'm sure a lot of you guys would have wanted to see the mixed tag team match with Kurt Angle and Ronda Rousey against Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, since it was the best match of the night. I think a lot of us didn't really expect for that match to actually be as great as it was, hence why it wouldn't have been placed as a main event. And I also thought of both the 3-minute squash between Undertaker and John Cena because of the storyline of John Cena sitting in the audience hoping to face Undertaker. But I think that would even make more sense for that to be a night 2 match, so that John Cena's waiting even more to find out if he's facing Undertaker at this event or not. So I think that automatically means that the WWE Championship match would be the night 1 main event, since we know that Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar would be the last match of the night, regardless of a single or double night WrestleMania. And the last WrestleMania we're talking about is WrestleMania 35, which the night 1 main event would have been Seth Rollins versus Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship. And this of course makes sense, considering that we now have the Royal Rumble matches for both the men and the women's, where you can easily make a women's match as the main event of one night and the men's as the other main event. However, that hasn't always been the case, and this was the first year that we had a women's main event at WrestleMania, and I honestly think if that match didn't have Ronda Rousey, I think that match would have been night 1, and Brock Lesnar versus Seth Rollins would have been night 2's WrestleMania main event. Especially for years to come, the only time we have seen another women's main event for WrestleMania was Bianca Belair versus Sasha Banks at WrestleMania 37, and even that match was the night 1 WrestleMania main event. And Rhea Ripley and Charlotte Flair almost became the main event of WrestleMania 39, but even then, that would have been night 1 instead of night 2. So it makes sense in this case that if we have the women main eventing WrestleMania night 2, that Seth Rollins versus Brock Lesnar would have indeed been the main event of WrestleMania 35 for the first night.